When Nintendo sent me Metroid Prime Federation Force to review, I already had an idea of what to expect. I first played Federation Force back at E3 2015. Well, actually, I guess technically I played Blast Ball, but beyond that, I played a 3 against 3 match at Nintendo's booth and I really enjoyed it. And when I heard that Nintendo was releasing Blast Ball with a campaign mode, I was very interested to say the least. Now, before we get started, I just want to make it clear that I'm not going to be comparing Federation Force to other titles in the Metroid Prime series. I think that games should be able to stand on their own, no matter what series they're coming from. So, as I was saying, Federation Force has become a package deal that includes a traditional campaign, which involves completing various missions on various planets, as well as Blast Ball, where each team's goal is to shoot a ball into the opposing team's goal. What's great about Federation Force is that there's local and online multiplayer for the entire game, except practice modes. This is super nice, and online play works perfectly. Now for multiplayer, each player will need to have a copy of the game, unless you're playing Blast Ball, which has download play support. And on that note, let's talk about Blast Ball. There are 2 different modes in this part of the game, Versus and Challenge. Versus is a 3-on-3 match, and for every win, your rank will increase. But Challenge is different. You and 2 other players compete against 5 different groups, with 3 CPU opponents in each. With each win, the difficulty of the opposing team increases, and as the name implies, it's definitely a challenge. After a few tries, I managed to beat all 5 teams thanks to my great teammates, but it wasn't easy. Those 5 matches were super intense, so much so that my heart rate was actually twice as much as my normal resting heart rate. And I'll say this, of all the times that I played Blast Ball, I always had fun, so good job Nintendo. Now, if you aren't into playing with real people, you can always play single-player versions of both Versus and Challenge, which will pair you with CPUs. It's not as enjoyable as playing with real people, but it gets the job done if you don't have the ability to connect online or don't have any friends near you. As you're playing Blast Ball, completing achievements will unlock customizations that you can use on your mech. In fact, there's actually a lot more customization in Federation Force than I was expecting. You can change the paint job, set online communication messages to the D-pad, and even change your voice's language, gender, and pitch. One thing I don't like though is that you unlock paint jobs by completing achievements, but they aren't listed in the game, so you kinda have to find them by luck. Now you can also unlock exclusive paint jobs with amiibos, and it's always nice to have an additional use for my 70 plus amiibos. For the campaign, there's also mod customization, which have various effects on the gameplay, such as increasing your shot's damage by 20%, change how much healing you get from capsules, reduce damage taken, and even decrease recovery time when firing weapons. Some mods do have special restrictions though, like some only allow you to equip 1 copy or break after 1 use, and one of them only works in single player. That mod is called Lone Wolf. When equipped, it makes campaign missions easier if you're playing them alone. It does this by doubling damage given to enemies and reducing damage inflicted by those enemies. While the game does recommend using it in single player, if you don't, you get a nice point bonus at the end of the mission, so I've never used it before. Speaking of missions, let's talk in depth about the campaign. The campaign levels are a bunch of different missions that take place on a few different planets, with goals like eliminating all enemies, recovering items, infiltrating enemy bases, and so on and so on. I love the variety of missions to complete, some of which are actually extremely challenging. However, I wish there was a bigger variety of planets to visit, instead of just the typical ice world, desert world, and enemy world. Now before each mission, you get to choose how many of each type of special weapon you're going to take with you, but you do have a limited amount of storage, so choose wisely, because what you choose is actually important. You'll definitely want fire shots in the ice world, electric shots if you're going to be fighting enemy robots, and you'll definitely want some health capsules too. Now on to gameplay. In case you haven't already figured it out, Federation Force is a first-person shooter taking place in a mech, except for the rare occasion where you travel outside of your mech. The only forms of attack are normal shots and special weapons, which are the ones you would have picked at the beginning or collected during the game. Basically, all actions in the game are triggered with the A button, and every puzzle is solved by shooting something or pressing a switch. Now granted, these puzzles are mostly just shooting and collecting stuff, and sure, it's slightly repetitive, but the mission goals are varied enough to keep them interesting. My favorite missions while playing the game were infiltrating the Space Pirates weapons factory without your mech, and capturing ice titans by luring them into cages around the map. These missions were challenging and required you to think about your actions before performing them. Other missions, though, were just run and gun or go to the center of the temple, grab a mysterious object, and leave. While these missions weren't necessarily bad, they weren't memorable in any way. It was just going through the motions to the next mission. Once again, to reiterate, it wasn't that these types of missions were bad, they're just missing that hook, you know? Something that makes you want to come back and play it again. And sadly, that's how a lot of Federation Force's campaign is. The story is mostly just a generic complete mission after mission with some vague story lining into it. In fact, Samus, who's mentioned throughout the game, sounds like she's having a more interesting time than I am. Adding to that, the characters in this game aren't memorable in any way, and I know you're supposed to be your character, but what about the person who's always on the transmission? What's his name? Is it a he or is it a her? Who is that person? I have no idea. Now, when you're playing missions with up to 3 other players, things feel better. But without them, just playing alone, it feels really lonely. And it's hard to find purpose in what you're doing. In short, Federation Force is a fun game, it really is. It's also a good-looking game with some of the best 3D effects I've seen. The problem is that I can't find the game's soul, you know? If you like a good arcade shooter, you'll find tons of fun in this game. But if you're looking for any kind of memorable story, characters, etc., don't expect it, because it's not there. So this has been a Beta64 review of Metroid Prime Federation Force. Thanks for watching.